Hi, everyone. You're very, very welcome. Good afternoon. And thanks for taking the time to join us here at Creative Youth for the next hour and a half. As you well know, many of you, Creative Youth is a plan designed to enable the creative potential of every young person. It was published back by the government in December 2017 as one of the cornerstones of the Creative Ireland programme. So what's it all about? It's about securing the opportunities for our children and our young people to become creative citizens. And at the heart of the programme, again, as many of you know, there's a conviction that knowledge and creativity should be equal partners in the formation of our children, supporting them to become creative and active citizens. For the last 3 years, Creative Youth has been supporting measures to give access, to ensure inclusion, and to support positive and sustainable outcomes for children and young people. This event today is designed to showcase some of the programs, to provide insights and learning from those programs about the impact, and hopefully as well, we will contribute to longer term planning for the future of Creative Youth. This webinar is part of a wider and broader deliberation, but today it provides an opportunity for us to reflect on the progress to date and to input ideas concerning the challenges that lie ahead. On Thursday, at the same time as today, Creative Youth will host another webinar to discuss the theme of creative youth in the community. And meanwhile, there is a separate ongoing consultation with young people themselves. The output of all of these consultations will be fed into the Creative Conference, the online conference, which will take place on the 13th of May. And you can find details of these events on the Creative Youth website. Now, I mention all these to say that while there may be some overlap in our conversations today between youth initiatives in formal schooling and in the community, my task will be to try and make sure that we stay focused on the creative youth initiatives that have been taking place in early years, in primary and secondary, in third level, and in teacher education settings. The pandemic has hit the education system and young people very hard. Teaching and learning online has proven to be very challenging for many. No doubt it has affected the creative youth initiatives too. And I'm sure we'll be hearing from our panel about some of the effects and some of the challenges that have arisen. But I also know that we're going to hear lots of examples of how creativity has flourished in spite of COVID. It's my great pleasure to welcome to today's event Dr. Mimi Doran, Dr. Triona Stokes, Jenny Buggie, and Professor Dervil Jordan, all of whom bring expertise and a specific perspective on creativity in the education system to this conversation. They're also bringing direct experience of the creative youth initiatives and research experience. Through these lenses, they will help us to take stock of the impact of the Creative Youth and Education Plan. They will help us to explore the learnings, to identify the gaps, to suggest what needs to happen next. Who are we leaving behind? How do we achieve equity? What are the positive personal well-being outcomes for young people? In the audience today, we have almost 200 people from such a wide range of backgrounds: individual artists, teachers, early childhood sector, primary, secondary and tertiary education, the arts organisations, the NCCA, youth organisations, policymakers from a wide range of government departments, including the Department of Education and Science, the Department of Children. I know it has a new name now, but it's still always going to be the Department of Children and Youth for me, Department of Arts, to mention but a few. So what I hope is going to happen over the next hour and a half is that you will engage with this audience, or with this panel, that you will start contributing through the chat function, that you will have some questions ready for the question and answer session, because the format is as follows. We start with a presentation from each of our panelists for about 10 minutes. Then we move into a discussion and question and answer session. And then the panelists will have an opportunity to sum up at the end. We'll also have a chance to give your views on 2 key questions at the end about your sense of what's going to happen regarding creativity in education in the future. And I understand that every single comment that's recorded will be fed in to a report which will contribute to the main event which is taking place in May. So it's my great pleasure to warmly welcome to the platform, in a sense, Dr. Mimi Doran. Thank you, Mimi, and we look forward to hearing you.
Hi, well, as I said, I'm Mimi Doran, and I'm a Carlow woman living in Dún Laoghaire, and I teach in a secondary school in Bray. And I'm going to give you a quick overview of creative schools and what I do as a creative associate. It's an initiative of the Creative Ireland programme, and it's led by the Arts Council in partnership with the Department of Education and Skills and the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht. It builds on the concept of arts-rich schools, which proposed the Arts in Education Charter. Currently, we have 464 schools taking part in the Creative Schools Initiative: primary schools, secondary schools, youth reaches and special schools. Creative Schools aims to put creativity at the heart of children's and young people's lives. Schools develop a 3 to 5 year sustainable creative plan. The plan responds to schools' needs and priorities. So I meet with the whole school community. I meet with the students, young people, teachers, school leaders, management, and we discuss creativity. In the photo here, you'll see me with the Creative Schools coordinator in the school and the principal and with all of the students. And we're talking about creativity. It's at the whole school assembly. We develop common language and understanding of creativity so we can progress it in the school. Creative Schools is about thinking strategically about the arts and creativity. And we develop a bespoke long-term plan with each school. And it's important to say that one size doesn't fit all. We link in with the wider school curriculum and planning, which is vital if you want to embed creativity across all subjects and all departments. And it's vital if you want to reinforce the impact of creativity on children and young people's learning, development and well-being. We draw on a range of resources in the wider school community. We encourage schools to link up with and maximise opportunities from existing arts and cultural programmes. And we also create partnerships and we have links with artists and arts organisations at both local and national level. As a creative associate, I work with schools. Sorry, my clicker is going a bit wobbly there. If I can get Shane, do you mind going to the next slide? Brilliant, thank you. As a creative associate, I work with schools for 2 years. They have me for 9 days a year and they receive funds of €2,000 to spend per year. So they get £4,000 total to develop opportunities for young people to engage in arts and culture. Creative associates are teachers like myself, or they're artists or creative practitioners. As a creative associate, I do a number of things. I'm a bit like, I suppose, a creative consultant or more of like an independent critical friend. And I come to the school and guide and support them and help them to understand where they are on their creative journey. And we start by carrying out an analysis of the school's engagement with the arts and creativity. We do this through meetings, workshops, questionnaires, and we involve the whole school community. We look at what the school is doing well, what needs improvement, are there any gaps? We identify challenges and goals, and we support teachers to value what they're currently doing and also challenge thinking in relation to new opportunities with regard to arts and creativity and teaching and learning. Children and young people's voice is central to the programme, and I ensure as a creative associate that children and young people's voice is heard and acted on. And this can be challenging at times. I help set up a student advisory committee that's diverse and inclusive. And here in this particular image, you can see young people organising data in one of the workshops. I had asked them what creative things they do in school, what creative things they do outside of school, and what creative things they would like to do. I'm going to show you a short 2-minute video clip of a documentary on creative schools that aired on RTE. And here you'll see young people's voice in action in the creative process. If you can put on that clip, great.
In Dublin, students at Step Aside Educate Together are working hard on their project, an end-of-year festival that celebrates creativity and sustainability. Putting the students' voices at the centre of decision-making is a big part of Creative Schools. In Step Aside, the students are driving plans for the festival.
Oh, hello. Right. We're going to sit here.
We're really keen to allow students who wouldn't ordinarily have a voice, a space to find that voice and to be part of something that is guiding what's happening for the students in school. It builds confidence and self-esteem, and it allows those students who might not have had the courage or the kind of, assertiveness to tell us what they wanted.
Do you want to lead? Check in? Okay, go first.
Okay, so I am the chairperson for the council that are organising this festival. I'm also helping with technology, setting up stages, things like that. It's going to be amazing. It's arts, so drama, public speaking, music, poetry. So we had discussed donation boxes. We had an idea for a free-for-all, so you can go up onto the stage.
They need to check in with us this week to see where we're going. Like it's incredible to see what they're capable of when you give them the opportunity to do so.
I think when they feel like they're being listened to by us, and it's not just for show, like they actually getting back what they're putting in.
Yeah. I was also thinking that we could maybe like make smoothies or something, and we could like sell them.
Okay.
Because like you could get like, I don't know, strawberry smoothies and stuff like people would definitely like buy that.
Kuhn's furiously scribbling notes.
That's what your team is going to decide.
You need to decide that.
If the child is happy and engaged and connected to school, their learning experience is just going to be richer, full stop.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that clip, and you could really see how young people's voice, engagement and agency was encouraged. The voice of the child and young people, of course, is vital to Creative Schools, and it's core to, and it's a principle of creative youth. And I think a lot more of this really needs to happen right across education. I think you'll need to go on to my next slide for me, if you don't mind. Okay. So when children and young people are involved, so when children, sorry, my clicker's not working. Anyway, when children and young people are involved in an actual program and when their input is appreciated, you'll actually see what happens. Because here in this particular program, it belongs to a school, and you can see the design, development, delivery of the program where students had an input. And then this type of program is very diverse, it's exciting, it's dynamic, and it's fun. In this example, young people in the school and in the clip you saw wanted to develop a student festival, and they wanted it to be led and managed by the students. And they wanted it to be attended by other schools and the wider school community. The festival was to focus on creativity, sustainability and the environment. And at the beginning of the festival, the main focus was all about the festival. But as we consulted with the students, the process of being creative and having a chance to engage in different art forms with various artists became much more important. And the festival became more of a showcase event where students performed or exhibited work they had developed with artists. So you'll see here the schools team matched the school's needs with artists and creative practitioners. So students had an event management workshop where they looked at how to manage a festival, looked at health and safety, and looked at things like insurance. They had a drama workshop with a director and writer, and they worked over a 3 to 4 month period with young people, and they were able to perform their work. They also took part in a sculpture and photography project with a leash artist over 3 to 4 days. Over 3 months, and the students made plastic headdresses out of single-use plastic and took portraits wearing them, wearing the creations. They also had an art and science workshop with 2 Offaly artists, where one came from a background of physics and the other was a fashion photographer, and they talked all about collaboration. And young people had a very lively debate here on environmental issues. They also did some upcycling workshops with 2 textile artists, and they showed students how to reinvent their own clothes, all in keeping again with sustainable fashion. They also built on other work being done, like work with Poetry Ireland, and students were able to perform their work at the Student Festival. So these workshops really strengthened and created new links between the schools and artists. And of course, it created much needed work for artists, creative practitioners. The next slide, please. So the festival was held in May and it had great weather, and you can see photographs here of students doing a variety of things. They're organising and debating and observing and dancing and acting and discussing. Basically, they're being creative and having lots of fun. And it was a really brilliant day because students were able to see their vision and their idea become a reality. And it was quite emotional, but there was a brilliant feel-good factor that was fantastic for everyone. Next slide, please. Thanks. So all of that, of course, that kind of work couldn't happen without building good relationships with students, parents, staff, artists, arts organisations and the wider school community. And here this image just gives you a quick snapshot of the kind of partnerships and connections that happen in creative schools. You can see here the librarian in Dún Laoghaire Lexicon with students' work. We had an exhibition there. We've had students and politicians at a photo call in the National Gallery. You can see young people participating in a film documentary. And we have, of course, the socially distant exhibition opening and a photo call with a politician. So there's lots of positive collaboration between artists, arts organisations and schools. And of course, we have the voice, energy and imagination of young people. As one young fella said to me when I asked him how creative schools was going for him, you know, he turned around and he said to me in his best high-pitched kind of singing voice and with a swing of the hips, he said, you know, I'm loving it. So I actually took that as a really positive. So building relationships and partnerships is key in creative schools. And if you can put me on to the final slide. So I say, as I would say here, I'm aware that there's an evaluation of the Creative Schools programme and that it's underway. And I know initial findings will be available soon. And I'm really looking forward to this. On a personal level, Creative Schools has had a huge impact on my own teaching. It has given me a chance to reflect on my own teaching practice, and it's increased my confidence in developing creative approaches to teaching and learning. And in my experience, Creative Schools needs to link in with the wider school planning that's happening. It needs to link in with individual teachers' practice, with subject departments, and with leadership and management, so that it's not just left to the art department or the music department or the English or Irish departments, that it also includes science and maths, etc. Only then can we really embed creativity in the arts. And of course, I would say Creative Schools is giving access to young people to experience quality arts that foster and nurture their creative and imaginative capabilities. The Creative Schools framework responds to and provides for diversity, which contributes to creativity. And it is an approach that suits the Irish education system. Finally, I did mention that, you know, we work with over 460 schools, and that's hundreds of teachers and thousands of students having access to quality arts engagement. But we do have 4,000 schools. So I think that all schools should have the opportunity to engage with creative schools. So just sit and think, what would it be like if every school, every child and every young person had access to the Creative Schools programme? What might that look like? And what would the impact be? Thank you for listening.
Sorry, folks. I just wanted to say thank you to Mimi. That was an amazing presentation in such a short time, bringing to life Creative Schools, bringing it right in here with us. I'm encouraging people now, if they have any questions or would like any further clarification, maybe to put it into the chat box and we can deal with it later. Thanks a million. So I think we're probably ready now, Triona, to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Fáilte romh isteach. So I want to start by telling you a little bit about myself and my background. So you can see here that I'm engaged in initial teacher education. I have the privilege of leading drama education at the Freble Department of Primary and Early Childhood Education at Maynooth University. And through this role, I have been involved in 2 different initiatives through the Arts and Education Charter. And one of these is ongoing as ACERR or ACER. I'm a member of the Arts and Cultural Education Research Repository. And that committee is working to showcase arts education research in free public access fora. The other role has been my engagement with artist in residency programs funded by the Arts Council. I have coordinated our original dance artist, Lisa Cliff, in residence. And then since that time, I'm working to coordinate and work with our storyteller in residence, Peter Hussey. I'm a drama teacher on a day-to-day basis. I see drama very much as something that you teach and facilitate rather than lecture. And as such, I've been involved in the Association for Drama Education in Ireland for a number of years. I'm currently on their subcommittee for Curriculum Matters. I'm a former primary teacher, and I've also worked as a freelance practitioner in schools, and I have been artist in residence in a couple of different county council settings as well. So you can see on the right-hand side of my slide that my research primarily involves young children, their experiences of pretend play and play practice in the communities in which they attend early years settings. But my invite today stems primarily from my authorship of the Principles for Arts Facilitation for Early Years. And these principles are at draft stage at the moment. They're about to be piloted in settings, in early years settings, with artists, in collaboration with artists, and working to test these principles. So I'm going to give you a flavour of these principles as my presentation proceeds. So the principles are in 4 groups, and the first and second group I'm going to take together. So group 1 of the principles, children are creative, and group 2, children's creative expression must be valued and nurtured. So we all know that many artists spend years trying to recreate the magic of childhood, where children's ability to unconsciously flick from one mode of representation to another is quite astounding and has been well researched. If we take Tina Bruce's assertion that creativity is an attitude of mind, I believe it is one that is cultivated very early on in life and is shaped very much by the adults who respond to that child's initial creative endeavours and enterprises. If you look to the image, we're reminded of the value of nature. And being based as I am in the Frebel department, I'm very influenced by the work and teachings of Friedrich Frebel, who foregrounds nature as a creative resource. Many of you will know his establishment of the kindergarten movement, or the garden for children. And it's the bounty and lack of structure of nature that I feel most appeals to the creative senses. Finally, I want to bring your attention here to the recent OECD report, which talked about everyday moments for creativity. And this for me is the cornerstone, trying to find opportunities to instill children's curiosity and to build on their excitement in their creative discoveries. How we can do that is based around the concept of little c creativity, as Csikszentmihalyi termed it, or possibility thinking, as Anna Kraft cited. On the right-hand side, you can see our colleague in Calcutta, Chaitali. She's taking the role of supportive and playful adult here in work that's happening as part of the Frebel Hope Teacher Education Partnership. This role of playful and supportive adult has been really well set out for us by the Ashter curricular framework and encourages the capacities that we associate so much with creativity. And these include risk-taking particularly and building resilience. You can see here Hart describes an environment of trust and recognition within a spirit of inquiry. And for me, that's at the centre of the creative youth ambition. Sorry. On the right-hand side, you can see a picture from my neighbourhood. And given the concerns for children's play in recent times with the pandemic, I think it's nice and heartening to see an image of children taking back the streets, if you will. So we can see children's play and creative expression take its form on the pavements around our cities and towns, as we look to see how they're negotiating the pandemic. But we know, despite this happy note, that the last 10 years have seen an international fall in creativity levels, and these have been well documented. The Irish Neighbourhood Play Study particularly brought this to our attention by Dee O'Connor and other academics. And Creative Youth and its initiatives is working to write this in association with our early years settings and primary schools. And we're on the start of this journey, if you will. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. So on the left-hand side there, you see an image by Beth O'Halloran entitled Exploring and Thinking. That's from the same titled commission, Exploring and Thinking. And I think it offers pause for thought for where our early years professionals might be along this journey, this exciting journey that Creative Youth have begun. As I mentioned, the principles pending publication are going to be tested now in schools and settings, but the message of hasten slowly or festina lente rings in my ears. Change is slow. This type of change where we're talking about changing to create an attitude of mind where creativity is part and parcel of our everyday activity and thinking has to happen slowly and has to bring everybody along with it. Therefore, opportunities for professional learning I would see as collaborative enterprises between the artists and the early years professionals happening, just as they have been happening at the creative schools level. Here we see the 9 elements of a creative person. And you might have noticed this opening image on my first slide. This is Matthew, and we see him here peering into a box perched on a table, wrapped in a towel tied in a knot. I think Matthew's creative exploration and play exemplifies a lot of the core elements of the creative person, according to O'Connor's research. Matthew is no longer Matthew, however. He has become Matman. Here is Matman's phone that has been carefully crafted and supported by the adult who had to assist him in cutting it out. Here is Matman's car, his interpretation of the cardboard box with which he has spent some time playing and exploring. Space, time, and opportunity are the 3 things I see in this picture sequence. But what you don't see in the picture sequence is the support, the invisible support of the adult, the playful and supportive adult supporting the risk-taking that Ken Robinson espouses as essential to creative endeavour. Why would you perch a box on the edge of a table when you could safely have it on the ground? Why would you allow a child go around in a towel tied loosely when they could trip or fall? These are the decisions that the supportive adult has made in cultivating Matthew's creativity and allowing him to direct the fun. He is the agent of his own learning, and that voice is very central to the Creative Ireland and Creative Youth initiatives, and that's what we need to showcase, and that's what we need to build upon. When you read these creative person attributes or elements, you could be reading the list of a child who the attributes we hope a child about to leave school might have. And therefore I couldn't help but thinking about what we want for children as part of the revised primary school curriculum has to chime with these principles that we have been learning about. And there's a very real and exciting opportunity for us now in education as the primary school curriculum is being re-envisioned. And I want to end by showing you two images on our slide. That this was a response, and I want to thank my colleague Laura Thornton for allowing me to replicate this. So what you'll see here are adapted images from the draft primary school curriculum. In the Freble department, we've taken the liberty of adding creativity as a proposed principle for the primary school curriculum. And on your right-hand side, the key competencies. We're so delighted with the opportunity to see being creative up there as a key competence. However, we also feel that being an artist needs to be included. And in that way, the work of the artist and the arts can very much be under that domain, as well as, but not precluding from, creativity being viewed in a broader way across every skill set and every subject grouping of our curriculum. This is what I feel we need in order that children are meeting the opportunities for creativity in every part of their day, in every setting that they're in, whether it's the early years setting, the primary school, the after school care, or indeed, in times to come, the theatre or arts hub. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Triona. That was really, really wonderful, very rich, and I have no doubt there'll be lots of questions and comments coming through the chat room. Thank you. So I think we're ready now to hear Jenny. Jenny was, I think, stepped out of her classroom today.
I did indeed, Catherine. And thank you so much for having me here today. It's been such a pleasure to hear Mimi speak about creative schools and Triona to integrate her practice from the third level environment to the on-site work with children and the importance of that integration between school and early years all the way back up to policy creation and into teacher education as well. Because as a primary school teacher, which is my key function here today, and a reason why I'm particularly delighted to be here today, I'm going to speak to you a little bit about that piece of enabling the creative potential of every child, and how in the last couple of months, in a particularly challenging time for our education system, our arts organizations and arts community, and our global community, that this has been a sustaining challenge for engaging with creative youth initiatives. But I would maybe also like us to think a little bit about the sustainability of in-school creative initiatives and to ensure that we seek to enable and not undermine by invisible labor and potentially invisible sacrifices by our most needy children. But first I'm going to start by maybe talking to you a little bit about who I am and what I do. I've had the great privilege of engaging with 3 of the creative initiatives that work in schools and come under the Creative Youth umbrella. I've worked with Teacher Artist Partnership as a teacher and as a member of the design team since 2014. We have been a creative school since its inception with our associate Gabby McGrath, and we recently joined Creative Clusters as partnership with our schools, St. Coleman's here in Stradbally, Holy Family Junior School, my own school in Portlaoise, and our sister school, Holy Family Senior School, and also Scullbreed in Rathdowney, County Laois. And I'd like to talk to you in a little bit more detail about what these initiatives mean for me as a practitioner, for the children that I work with, and for the teachers and artists that we train in our program Teacher Artist Partnership. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Teacher Artist Partnership or the TAP initiative, it is basically a summer course where teachers earn their EPV days, which I'm using today to be with you, one of those. I'm delighted to do so. And artists are paid for their participation in that week-long course. And a key aspect of this training is that we bring both professionals into the room together, both the educational sphere and the arts sphere come together in a protected space to learn about one another and to learn from each other's experiences. And we hope that during that week, teachers maybe move a little bit further towards their artist identities and artists who are coming to work in schools move a little bit closer to their own teacher identity. Because when we work in schools together as artists and as teachers, we are both. And I thought that Triona made such a beautiful comment there about the role of the adult in a space when they are supporting a child within a creative process. And Mimi spoke about in her video, it showed how children, when they really realized that the adults were listening and not just paying lip service, how the value of their contribution was seen in a new light for them. And that relationship, that creative partnership, that two identities coming together and moving each other slightly is exactly how we work in teacher-artist partnership and how we work with children, because they are the key part, the reason why we do our work, the reason why all of us are here today. And we are the enactors of policy within our classrooms and within the educational space. I would also like to point out that teacher-artist partnership is deeply reliant on the local connections of our education centres. Teacher-artist partnership and creative clusters are based in Tralee Education Centre and draw deeply on the expertise of the director and the team down there. But also we have connections with the arts offices and local arts practitioners. So that relationship that I spoke of is a locally based one that can grow in its connections, and hopefully through relationship, there is sustainability to long-term drawing out of creative practice in schools. Okay. So in 2020, much like everyone else, we had to flip our practice and get some new skills and become a little bit more creative online. And this was a fabulous opportunity, not just to get better at trying to interact in spaces such as this, but to really think about, why are we in this space? Why is it important that we get our creative initiatives into school? And I think Mimi mentioned about creating professional opportunities for artists in education, but Triona also mentioned that vital part of keeping the arts as a key component within, embedded in our education system. And that is something I feel very deeply passionately about, that the arts are part of education in Ireland. I've asked Stephen and Shane, who are helping us here today, to share with you some links. And that's some of our feedback that we received from our participants on TAP Online this year. We were struck by the deep influences they felt that it made to themselves as educational practitioners. And I had the joy of working with one of our teacher-trained artists and teachers, during the week with KidZone. And they mentioned how working with TAP had actually changed how they see themselves as a teacher. It had changed their identity, and that every artist should have a teacher. Every teacher should have an artist. And I would hope to think that maybe every artist who wants to work in education would have a teacher who will help them negotiate that space. I'm just keeping an eye on our time. There's some of our digits that we're very proud of and are looking forward to growing in the years to come. And I'd just like to mention that creative clusters, in our cluster this year, we are working on that idea of connections. And Catherine mentioned the challenges of COVID-19 this year. They've been deeply challenging in connecting with the children and families in our school communities, deeply challenging to sustaining creative initiatives in this difficult time. But we're learning and we're trying, and you'll see in the middle section there, it's an image from an upcoming project, part of our project. I'm working with playwright Kate Heffernan and Laois Education Centre, based on their work of building communities of belonging following the Teaching Council's Beacons project, which looks at communication across the different partners in education locally. And what we want to do in our cluster is to bring a level of visibility where children, as Trina's image showed you, children love to play and to draw and to make their environment their own. And we want to do that and create a greater level of invisibility through the work of our cluster. Pillar 4 mentions Ireland as a centre of excellence. And the work of our national coordinator, Dr. Katie Sweeney, Free Education Centre and all of our supporters at Teacher Artist Partnership through their hard work succeeded in getting Erasmus Plus funding to develop Teacher Artist Partnership with our partner countries, Serbia, the Netherlands, Austria and Greece, to look at our practice. And I think this part of excellence has to be about reflecting and thinking about what we can do better and how we are achieving, but what isn't working, and to address that. Reflective practice, as us teachers call it. And I'd like to just address that by referencing Parker Palmer, who I always find sustaining in times of challenge as a teacher. And he talks about good teachers, but I would say that in the educational space, artists become good teachers. And I would hope that teachers become a little bit of an artist themselves. And he speaks about connections made by good practitioners are held not in their methods, but in their hearts, meaning heart in its ancient sense, as a place where intellect and emotion and spirit will converge in the human self. Mimi spoke about relationship. We need to create space for relationship through education spaces and creative initiatives in schools. And for that, there's 3 things that I would like to see us address. Number 1, the need for quiet, solid, embedded arts engagement within schools that is based on relationship between arts and educational practitioners and children. Number 2, that we explicitly name all aspects and fund all aspects of creative programs. Planning has improved exponentially through the creative youth programs. We now have protected planning for artists and teachers. We have always acknowledged the existence of the funding for creative practitioners to work with children and teachers. But maybe the role of evaluation and documentation has grown exponentially within the digital space. If we want our creative programs to be promoted, we need to ensure that that is included within how we divide up the funding that goes to schools. Finally, and most crucially, I would say that school leaders and teachers drive creative initiatives in schools with support of creative organizations and artists. We need release time for schools to properly give time to children. If there is an implicit expectation that schools will make do, schools make do by using the team and the teachers that do not have 30 children waiting for them in a classroom. And that's the special education team. Therefore, if we do not expressly fund teacher release time, we are implicitly asking our most vulnerable children to surrender their education supports to creative initiatives. And I know that that's not anything that any of us here want to happen within our school environments. And that's my last point for today, but I just want to also thank you deeply for the work that you are doing within our schools and our educational spaces and within our arts organizations. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, team.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenny. I mean, you have left us, I think, with lots of questions. You've highlighted, I think, some of the challenges. But I think you have left us all with a sense of great inspiration and passion for the work that you're involved in. So I'd again encourage people in the audience to think about those issues of the reflective practice, sustainability, the linkages, and how we find space and time in a really crowded school setting to allow for people to really think deeply and to work with children deeply around the whole area of creativity. So thank you. And now our final panel speaker, I'm going to call on Dervil. Dervil, I think we're ready.
Hi everybody. Just put my presenter view on. Hi everybody, my name is Dervil Jordan. I'm the head of the School of Education in NCAD, the National College of Art and Design. And I've been involved in art teacher education for most of my career, having trained initially as a painter in art college and very quickly realized that my passion lay an in-between space as an artist and an educator. So although I haven't directly been involved in the Creative Schools Initiative, my own experience of this dual identity, as Jennifer was mentioning, is as an artist turned educator, and it's mirrored in the many students with whom I work with on a daily basis. My own research found that distinctive types of learning are common to the arts. The art teacher's work is embedded in practice. It involves studio thinking, which means thinking through art, critical thinking, open-ended, discovery-based learning, and cooperative learning. All of these things have been mentioned already this morning. And all of the skills needed for a rapidly changing society that we're facing in the future. So in my professional work as a second level art teacher, I also strove to engage my pupils in working with artists and with contemporary art practice. In hindsight, I think that was probably an attempt to stay close to the world of art and the world of artists. And now, as a lecturer and head of education in NCAD, I recognize those artistic sensibilities that student teachers bring to their professional work as teachers. It is that overlap or tension between the artist and the teacher that I recognize as being valuable and often under-researched, and that I'm going to try and speak to today. Next slide, please. Not sure if my clicker is working either. So am I on to the second slide? Yeah. Sorry. So again, looking back, I am 40 years ago, I was also an artist teacher. On leaving college, myself and Helen O'Donoghue, a colleague of mine, piloted an artist in school scheme, which was funded by the Arts Council at the time. And I thought it might be relevant to bring us back today, 40 years later. This scheme was known as the Paint on the Wall scheme, and it employed over 24 artists and ran for a number of years in the early 80s. And again, in those early years, there was little real collaboration between the artist and the classroom teacher. The artist was seen as an expert who worked directly with the children, and the classroom teacher was kind of in the background and was involved in the early consultation processes in terms of gathering ideas and initial drawings from children, and after which the artist came into the school and facilitated the project over a number of weeks with groups of children. I mean, things have advanced significantly since then. Through the work of Creative Ireland and the artist-teacher partnerships, you can see the depth of engagement that is in place in the descriptions that Jennifer was giving of what she's doing, and Mimi as well. 40 years later, policymakers are still calling for connected thinking on the value of arts in education, but I think a lot has been achieved in the intervening years. So I'm going to start by giving a very brief policy overview of the development of the arts in developments across the arts and across education over the last number of years. In 1949, we had the Bodkin Report, highlighting the impoverished state of the arts in education. And out of that, the setting up of the Arts Council happened in 1951. We then, had the primary school curriculum, obviously was a major innovation in 1971. Transition year was introduced at second level, another innovative curricular reform. In 1979, we had a very important Benson report published by the Arts Council on the place of the arts in Irish education. And children and young people's access to making and experiencing art was seen as unstructured, arbitrary, and largely dependent on individual teachers and artists' personal interests. Across the 70s and 80s, we saw the establishment of the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment and a period of curriculum reform from the 80s to the 90s with the advent of the Junior Certificate Programme. And the revised primary school curriculum in 1999 had arts education as a central pivot. We had the points of alignment report with the Arts Council that was promoting these partnership approaches. And in 2012, there was two very important developments. One, the Arts and Education Charter, which was providing a joined up approach to art education provision. And the new framework for junior cycle was also a hugely innovative development, which continues to at the moment. 2016, we had the Creative Ireland programme, which is supporting a creative ecosystem within national and local policymakers, between art forms and between professional artists and teachers, resulting in a suite of interesting developments: the Creative Schools Initiative, the Teacher Artist Partnerships, the Arts and Education Portal, the Arts and Education Research Repository. All of these things exciting and very important connectors between arts and education. And in 2019, we have the Senior Cycle Review, which is well underway. And then in 2020, we have this commitment to Citizens' Assembly for Education, which again will prioritize critical thinking and problem solving, ensuring that the voices of young people and those being educated are central to the programme for government. So I see there's three tensions, I think, within this third space of the artist and the teacher. The first tension I see is between formal and informal sectors of the arts and education. There was a lack of joined up thinking between the plethora of arts organisations under the Department of Arts and the formal sector under the Department of Education and Skills. So these two policy developments in 2012 had a big impact on both the formal and the informal sectors. The Framework for Junior Cycle and the Arts and Education Charter, given the slow pace of change in curriculum reform, the Junior Cycle framework was very welcome. And the Arts and Education Charter was a joint agreement from both the Ministers of Education and the Arts to put the arts at the heart of the education system. I quote Gary Granville, who is our former head of education at NCAD, that he says integrating the imaginative initiatives taking place on the margins and replacing the negative space that was at art education will bring second level students into the 21st century discourse. This is obviously in relation to teacher education in NCAD, but I think it has still got a very strong validity across the arts sector. This notion of the imaginative initiatives taking place on the margins and bringing them into the centre. So the creative schools and the teacher artist partnerships have gone a long way to develop meaningful experiences for artist teachers and for young people in both of the formal and the informal sectors across primary and post-primary. The next slide is the second tension that was mentioned again by Jennifer earlier on. This identity between the artist and the identity of the classroom teacher. There's a very interesting paper has just been published by Alba Smith and Dorothy Morrissey on the artist-teacher partnerships. And they suggest that teachers and artists are typically seen as holding two distinct and contrasting identities, both within the seemingly conservative and liberal discourses, respectively. Their paper highlights the complementary knowledge and skills that both teachers and artists bring to arts education in schools. Deborah Britzman in 1991 argues that learning to teach, like teaching itself, is always a process of becoming, a time of formation and transformation. So identities are fluid in these cases and are constantly changing. The next, in my own doctoral work, which was on the dual identity of the artist teacher, I found that models of professional development, such as artist-teacher schemes, can enable boundary crossing and can help to build bridges between communities of practice of teachers and artists, and also rekindles the artist and the teacher's practice, reconnecting them with the world of contemporary art or the world of drama or music or whichever art form you're in. Smith and Morrissey again found that this disturbance through partnerships, which is an interesting concept, a visiting artist, teaching artist entering an educational setting, alters the space and forces negotiation of professional and personal identities. Other findings included that both teachers and artists' skills, their knowledge, their understandings can complement each other, especially where meaningful, sustained partnerships are invested in. And I think artists and teachers both need support in finding ways to develop their artist selves and their teacher selves. So the third tension that I would come across in my day-to-day work may not be, as relevant here today, but I think it's also very important in the overall picture, is a disjunct between second and third level education. Most of us will remember, our old Leaving Cert art course or our old Leaving Cert, exam that we would have had to have done. And it is not fit for purpose in this day and age. A new Leaving Cert review is now underway and is about to be started next year in terms of visual art. But this restrictive curriculum within second level can become a very big cause of conflict for artists who become teachers, or for artists working in schools. There needs to be a responsiveness to contemporary times and 21st century needs. Again, one of the outcomes of this restrictive curriculum is the Leaving Cert results in art can be very difficult. When somebody is interested in entering an art college, the Leaving Cert art program was not relevant in any way in the past. So you had a portfolio that had to be done outside of the school system in order to enter into third level, and that's not sustainable. It was also extremely difficult for students to get an A1 grade in art at higher level within the Leaving Cert. So you'll see from the diagram here that I have, art was the most difficult of all 34 subjects, with only 1.3% of candidates achieving an A1 grade. Now this improved significantly during the time of COVID, which you'll see in terms of the grey bar here. Surprisingly, under calculated grades, 8.5% of art students received an A1 grade compared to the year before, where 3.2% received it. So this is actually a difficulty for our teachers. It also is a disincentive for young people who want to choose art at senior cycle, because if they want to get their points, so it has a knock-on effect. The conflict in identity between the artist and the teacher can often, as Gary said again, Gary Granville, can be said to be mirrored in the disjunct between second and third level art and design. So this, just a last slide. I just want to give you a quick sense of the work of the School of Education, and I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but we have various programs in place where we work very closely with primary and secondary school students within our Access program. We have partnerships with the Museum of Modern Art, with our Freud project. We're carrying out workshops and research on students using galleries as a pedagogical space. And also a very important collaboration in our PATH program for access to higher education. We lead on the Creative Arts Summer School across our 6 partners, IADT, TCD, Marino, UCD, and the Royal College of Surgeons. And this is set up to provide opportunities for those interested in creative arts to sample what's on offer across 5 colleges and universities. So just thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to the questions that are coming next.
Thank you very much, Dervil. So that completes the first stage of our morning together, or afternoon, early afternoon. I think we've had really, really interesting contributions from all the panelists, and that's reflected in the list of questions that I have here. So I'm going to ask the four of you to sit up and get ready for really, I think, interesting and rich questions. And, you know, there are huge compliments to each one of you as well in the questions. So I'm going to I try and take them if I can in clusters, and I'm going to maybe direct them at the people that they've been directed to, but also invite everybody else, like all four of you, to contribute if you want to. So the question here, the first question here is about how best do we support schools to understand what creativity is and to value it across the entire school. So Mimi, I might start with you there. That question comes up several times in different ways.
Would you do me a favour and just repeat it for me?
Yeah, of course I will. It's how best do we support schools to understand what creativity is and to value it across the entire school. I mean, you've referenced it in terms of embedding it into school planning and so on, but maybe you can...
I suppose for me, really, when I go into schools as a creative associate, you know, I explain that creative schools have links with many of the things that are already happening in schools. Like I'll reference a number of Department of Education documents and frameworks that schools already use for planning and for teaching and for learning. For example, the Junior Cycle Framework 2015, of which I'm very passionate about and a big fan of, it focuses on curriculum changes and on developing skills, and being creative is one of those. And one of the key principles is creativity and innovation. And I also link in there to the Wellbeing Programme and the Wellbeing Guidelines and talk about cross-curricular collaboration and whole school approaches to creativity. There's also documents like the school self-evaluation, and I talk to schools about how the inspectorate, when they visit the schools, you know, their general job is looking at what works well in a school and what needs to be improved. And I explained that the NCCA are, you know, have a special focus on creativity when visiting schools, and they want to see how is it being embedded right across schools. There's other things like looking at our schools document 2016, and that's a framework that looks at learner experiences and teachers' individual practice and teachers' collective and collaborative practices. And it focuses on teaching and leadership. And I suppose it aims to encourage schools to find new and creative and effective kind of solutions and ways to learning for their teachers and for their students. Sorry, learning for their students and teaching for the teachers. And I suppose there's things like the digital strategy document also, where the Department of Education are embedding ICT skills. And I know there's a new one of them out. So I find my role as a creative associate, I can link all the kind of dots with all the policy documents that schools are using. And I think it's this kind of approach that, as a creative associate, that I'm really able to help schools with. You know, if they want to embed creativity, then we have to get all subjects involved right across, that it's not just the art teacher or the music teacher or the Irish or English teacher around drama or poetry or literature, but that it's all departments and there's a whole school approach. So I think that's what would really help schools out in, you know, I suppose another important aspect would be defining what creativity is, you know, and having a shared common language. I found that's of huge benefit for schools.
Okay, maybe Jenny, would you like to add something to that? In particular, I'm thinking of the enablers and the inhibitors to doing that kind of work, to just thinking about a school setting, thinking about how you're going to broaden it beyond those who are passionate and committed.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Mimi. And I think what Mimi said there is a really important understanding of the frameworks around it. And I was reminded of what Triona said about teaching drama, and that it's less telling about drama, but just facilitating and experiencing the drama. And I think for a lot of teachers, and Michael O'Reilly in our chat box there was saying, what about how do we stop teachers who are just the ones who love the arts, who are the ones pushing it in the schools? Because that's what happens. I'm that person. How do I get the other people who, and other teachers who may not have that intrinsic feeling of value to the arts, to help them to not see it? And I think this is the real danger with when we talk about enacting policies in schools, not seeing it as something as another thing that I have to do. And a key part of that, I think, is that the arts are one of the only subjects that will hit you in your heart. You feel creativity, You feel wonderful pieces of art. You feel wonderful performances. So we have to get the teachers into a space where they can feel what we mean by why creativity is important. And I think one of the things that we do with that is obviously training programs such as Teaching Our Artist Partnership, Creative Clusters, and Creative Schools, having those whole school experiences that are arts based. And we saw from Mimi's video that a lot of the documentation and pupil voice work is arts based, but that teacher training, and Dervil spoke about the lovely development timeline of integration. And a key point of that is that, as Triona said also, that in ITE, we are giving our teachers that we're training and experienced teachers an opportunity to feel creativity as a person so that they can support creativity in the classroom.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. I'm taking another question here, but I'm actually going to answer it because I've been given the answer. It's around how, following up on what both of you have said, how do we get linkages between arts organisations, creative associates and schools? How do we get them linking together in a more formal way? Is there a directory of arts and education resources and programmes? So yes, details of schools and creative associates in the Creative Schools Initiative are available on the Arts Council website, and the Arts and Education portal is also a good resort. Before I just move on to another cluster of questions, I do want to see if either Dervil or Triona just have any small point to add to what has been heard.
I would be just in picking up on the last question around how do we best support schools. I think the distinctive qualities of the arts might need to be highlighted. I mean, they're not exclusive to the arts, but there are distinctive qualities that are distinctive qualities that benefit young people engaging in the arts. And I think people would recognize them themselves when you talk about, feeling the experience of being part of a production, or the experience of working collaboratively across, a whole range of art forms. Anybody who's experienced a kind of a TY musical, or a play or engagement of some kind of deep and meaningful, significance that lasts forever. It lasts for a lifetime. So I think if we can try to get across that distinctiveness about what young people can learn and gain through the arts, that I think most of us would recognize, whether we're arts practitioners or not. I think as receivers of the arts, you will recognize that too. And that kind of message probably needs to be underpinned with maybe research, where we can actually stand over it and show evidence of it. And that aspect of arts education, I think, is something that we do need to probably bring more to the fore in an Irish context anyway.
Okay, and just
can I just to add to everything that's been said, I feel that for teachers and early years professionals and artists to collaboratively engage in professional learning demands the experience of the pedagogy of discomfort, as it's been termed, where a teacher or facilitator not enticed necessarily by the arts has had that experience of problem solving, trial and error, and eventually finding success in creating an artifact, creating something of which they're proud and of which they have that positive feeling. So I think that's one thing, that we need to create opportunities for professional learning which offers those in these positions, that all that gamut of people, pedagogy of discomfort, to experience that firsthand in order to be able to then support and scaffold the child in that situation, in that same situation, creatively. And the other point I would like to make, I suppose, my experience of schools and play in particular, is that what's counted counts. So we need to see play and creativity being evaluated in the reports from the inspectorate, for example, in whole school evaluations and so on. We need them explicitly named and identified. And I think that will show dividends in the investment and support and buy-in from the whole school support whole school approach that we're promoting.
Great, thanks, Trina. Just while you're talking, can I add another question here that applies probably more specifically to you than to the others? How can arts organisations engage and support creativity in the preschool environment? Are arts-based CPD for early years educators possible to develop? Now, we know, and you might be able to elaborate, that the Department of Children is going to shortly roll out some testing of the principles that you referred to earlier. But is there anything more you could add to that person's question?
Absolutely. There's great excitement and great possibility. We've seen evidence of this and the seeds that have been planted by 4 bursaries that have been awarded to the ARC, Graffiti, Recreate and Children's Books Ireland with the early years in the last couple of years. These have been awarded by the Arts Council and Creative Youth Initiative. And these bursaries, they're not at completion yet because of the pandemic primarily, but the work of the artists and the creative collaborations that have been evident from the settings where these bursaries were won have shown us a path that we can learn on and build from the successes of these endeavours in terms of building a model for CPD. And I would refer to Alva Kenny and Dorothy Morrissey's collaborative CPD model. We can look to that. It references everything from looking at the external agencies like our local authorities and arts offices and how they might support creativity in its development, to reflective practice and the necessity for mentorship, because it's only by working slowly and collaboratively together that we can build on the expertise so that we get purpose. Fit for purpose was a term Dervil used earlier, but designed with the needs of the early years setting I'm thinking of now particularly in mind, and one that sustains and promotes the development for everybody in it, as Jenny was talking about earlier.
Great, thanks. I'm going to move on for a moment to the voice of the child, which obviously came through in many of your presentations. Just the ability and the success of children to really engage and also to be co-creators in kind of creative moments. So the question being asked here is, do you think, and maybe starting with you, Mimi, do you think that, you know, based on the success of the program, that there is potential for creative schools to influence education, to embrace that practice more widely? So that's like, you know, how can creative schools have an impact on?
Oh, well, I mean, this is the key role as a creative associate. This is what literally my job is. You know, we had training with the Department of Children and Youth Affairs that you mentioned earlier as part of the creative schools training, and we do use the Lundy model, the one that was referenced earlier, on space, voice, audience, and influence. But I suppose the biggest thing is that I ensure as a school that when I go in and we talk about what creative things young people want to do, that it's not the teacher's choice, that it's not management's choice. And that can be difficult because, you know, you can get into situations where they're saying, no, this is what we want to do. But we spend time listening to children and young people, whether it's questionnaires or whether it's workshops. For example, in the slide I showed you, students were arranging the data in a workshop I was doing with them, and dance kept coming up. Now, I didn't know what they meant by dance, so I was able to flesh it out in the workshop, and I didn't know whether it was Irish dancing or ballet or hip hop or contemporary. And it's about really listening to them and then making sure that whatever they come up with, that is actually acted on. And I found that as a creative associate, once you talk to staff about that and explain to them what your role is, that it works quite well, you know, and you show them ways of empowering the young people. And in particular, when they're involved in a program, it gives them a real sense of connectedness and a real sense of kind of meaning and value. And their well-being overall, the students' well-being is great, but so is the teachers. So it is a key role of creative schools. That's what they're doing. But as I said, they're only doing that at the moment in 464 schools. It'd be great to see, you know, that role for creative associates and ensuring the voice of children and young people right across all the primary and secondary schools.
Okay, thanks, Mimi. Anybody else like to comment?
I'd just like to say maybe a little bit to build on that, and particularly for working with very young children. And Triona has spoken about provision in the early years. And I think particularly, and from maybe working with older children where they can really help to push and help to design the structure of the whole program, that work takes a little bit more support and a little bit more adult engagement with the younger children. And I would see, certainly from the work that we do in the classroom with our arts practitioners, that their ability to guide something that may be a place where the teacher or the artist has presented something that they could never choose from themselves, because part of our work as artists and teachers is to give them the opportunity to discover something completely new that they never knew before. And I think that within that, then they can choose what directions they take. And there's beautiful examples such as the images that Triona shared and one of the children in my own class, where children themselves get an opportunity to show their new languages of understanding to one another. And then their peers get to see that and be inspired by that themselves. From simple things like putting a handle on something, and then everyone puts a handle on something. That feedback that they get, the voice that they get back from their peers through their creative expression, is also a different kind of interpretation of the voice of the child, but equally as valid as the larger one. And that is essential when we're talking about policy within educational settings in the arts.
Okay, maybe we just move direction slightly. First of all, I want to say to somebody who in the audience who asked the question about arts in the community, we will have an opportunity on Thursday, I think I mentioned it earlier, when we're going to have another session like this, and we'll be able to look at that question and a number of others that have been raised as well. But I'd like to myself explore with you a little bit now what hasn't worked, what's not working. Where is space for development? Who has been excluded? Who is being excluded? How as the creative youth program is evaluated and moves forward, what are the things that you think need to change? And I'm going to ask all of you about that. I might start with you, Dervil, because you opened up a question about tensions. So you might just speak more to that, or bring in.
Well, you asked the question, what hasn't worked? I think it's maybe who we haven't reached. Maybe it might be another way of putting it. I think there is a very large, in terms of the arts can often be seen as quite an elite activity. Certainly in my experience in art college, the idea of attending an art college with its attendant portfolio requirement and a very kind of high level conceptual framework around what that portfolio might contain isn't actually, it is kind of way beyond an awful lot of people's understandings. And I think that we just increasing the visibility, the accessibility of the arts in education is an issue that we have to deal with continually in the work that we do in third level. And part of that problem, is in the visual arts, is this sort of disjunct between second and third level in terms of the kind of work that happens in a second level school compared to maybe what's expected at third level. So that's a barrier to access for a lot of people. There's a lot of different barriers across the arts. People would have, there's attitudinal barriers to, people would say, well, what am I going to do with that? What will I do with a degree from NCAD? What kind of a job would I get out of that? Or how can I make a living out of that? So all of those kind of things are they're big challenges facing, the arts and education. And I think we need to be able to tackle those head on and provide opportunities for underrepresented groups to access, and this is part of obviously government policy. It's part of the whole PATH initiative that is running across universities at the moment. So it is a work in progress, but there's a lot to be done.
Thanks, Dervil. I mean, I think it's important to name those issues. So maybe Jenny, I might ask you. Again, I did mean who are we leaving out, as well as what hasn't worked well.
I think, and I'll just refer back briefly, Catherine, to what I mentioned in my original presentation about ensuring that we are supporting the structures that are invisible, the invisible labour of creative work in schools, and how that gets done and what our expectations around that are. anyone who works with schools will know that the work of teaching happens in the moment in the classroom, but the work of preparing to teach happens outside of all of that. And a lot of that work is also true for creative initiatives. So the simple jobs such as supporting the artists to get their Garda vetting done, getting permission slips, all of that kind of work needs to be done, and timetabling, those kind of really boring things that are absolutely vital to the functioning of creative initiatives in school. Within the primary setting, there's most teachers, aside from senior management, have absolutely no scheduled non-pupil contact time. So I'm just going to refer back and say there, if we do not fund that time for release, how do we expect whole school initiatives to run forward and to be collaborative and to support our colleagues who may feel less competent in arts practice? How do we create that space for conversation and relationship?
Great, thanks, Jenny. And Triona?
Yeah, just support the points Jenny has made there. I do feel that this invisible work can be carried by the school with support and funding. And just going back to the point I was making earlier about valuing the arts and creative endeavour on paper in terms of the reports. I think the early years has led the way in this regard, and I just want to make that point because they have created an evaluation tool, and it's tools like that that maybe give credibility to projects where there mightn't be buy-in across the board. And it's my belief that you win the hearts and then you win the minds. And I think we've lovely examples of that here today. So I think once people have experienced a project like this and they understand no more than putting on a show, it takes everybody. It takes the administration team as well as the principal or the manager of the setting, depending on the context. It takes everybody, and that's really, I suppose, what we're aiming towards.
Thank you. And Mimi?
I suppose I would tend to look really and build on what's actually working at the moment. And there was a lot of mentioning of access, how do you access the arts? And I really think initiatives like Creative Schools work because, you have children and young people already in those environments. And teachers really welcome, creative approaches to teaching and learning. Like teachers really are flat out, and they just love seeing another set of eyes, a different set of skills coming into the schools, and making the environment really dynamic. And I really like the kind of Creative Schools model of working, where you have people who are teachers, and then you have people who are actually artists or creative practitioners. And there's kind of a swapping of kind of skills there and a transfer of kind of knowledge that works really well in the education system.
Okay. I'm going to invite each of you now, as we kind of begin to come to the end of the session, maybe to give us a final comment or two around what you'd love to say to policymakers, decision makers, influencers who are in the audience, but also to the audience themselves about what they might like to take away. And while that's happening, I'm going to invite Shane to put up a question to all of you that you might answer, which is, are you feeling optimistic about the future for creativity in the education system? It's just a yes or no answer. And then there's a further one, which is, in your opinion, is creativity seen as a core value / principle in the education system? Now they'll go up on the screen. And while I'm inviting our contributors to make their final comments, you might just have a look at those. Again, I just want to mention that there are so many questions. I couldn't take them all, but I think we've covered a lot of the ground. So I'm sure in their contributions, any final points will emerge. So maybe I'd start this time with Jenny.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. And I'd just like to finish by saying my own mother, Anne Buggie, was a principal of a primary school in Portlaoise for many years. And she had a lovely phrase, which was, in primary school, everybody gets to do it just because they're there. Whether they can kick a ball or not, play a tin whistle or not, or whether they're any good at all, but they just get to do it because they're there. And if we want to enable the creative potential of every child, we must enable every school. And funding and recognizing those aspects of creative school from beginning to end. And that to realize that schools are places where good practice meets good policy. And I think we're very much on our way there. And our teachers, artists are agents of creative youth policy. And if we enable them, we will enable all of our children. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And maybe Dervil?
Yeah, I would echo Jennifer that, you know, meeting good policy, good practice meets good policy. I think it's a good one to go away with as a takeaway. I think that the distinctive qualities of arts-based learning is something that we need to, you know, reiterate over and over again. And I think it's those distinctive qualities of arts-based learning that we are basically calling for into the future, to embed in our young people. Abilities to risk take, to innovate, to create, you know, all of the kind of rhetoric, I suppose, we hear over and over again. It's in arts-based learning, that's where you find it. So I think that that is something that we just need to get across as a message across all sectors of education and the arts.
Thanks, Dervil. And Mimi?
Well, I suppose you mentioned there about is creativity kind of valued in a way in policy, and I would say it's great to see that it's gotten a mention at the national level in the programme for government, because that really raises the status of arts and creativity practitioners, and also in the OECD's inclusion of creativity in the PISA assessment. So that shows that it's really being valued and that it is starting to be seen really as an important skill in kind of education. But as all the other panelists have said, what really is important is how we apply that learning and the ability to apply, you know, creative habits of mind. And that's what's really, really important. And I think having conversations like this, you know, where we're talking about how important it is to have children and young people's voice and how that needs to be more in education, you know, talking about what is creativity and how do we clearly define it and progress it within school environments, and how do we link it in with all of the whole school planning to make sure that creativity is like embedded right across the system. And I think, you know, we really do have to work with schools because, you know, as already has been said, the children and young people are already there. And I think there is a good, there's kind of good confidence with teachers wanting to work with artists, as I mentioned kind of earlier. And as I said, they have a different set of skills and a very unique perspective that is really welcomed. I also think, you know, we've got to make sure that creativity and creative approaches are in, you know, teacher training. That's really, really important. And right across, not just in the arts. I'm talking about science, languages, histories, geography, that all those kind of approaches, you know, that creativity and the arts are seen as really, really key. And of course, I'd say it again, I've said it a few times, you know, if we can roll out, you know, different initiatives like TAP, you know, like creative schools right across. And if we have really good CPD right across the schools, I think it'll do quite well. You know, it's a good way to go.
Thanks a million. And finally, Dervil, and then I'll just make a few concluding remarks before we close.
I think it's Mimi.
Yeah, it's me now. Don't worry, I won't let it go. Yeah, just building on what others have said, I suppose my main message is let's keep creativity on the bill. And not just the bill for creative youth, but but for young people and children, particularly in general, through curriculum, through their everyday opportunities that they meet. And every child, every chance, every day is a slogan I really like. It was designed in terms of whole school inclusion and behaviour management, but I think it applies equally to creativity and the opportunities that are needed for every child to get the chances that Jenny was talking about there, just for being there, just for turning up. So I won't delay because I know we're tight on time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just to say, first of all, thank you to each of the four of you. I think you have really managed to bring creative youth in education right in here to this room with 200 other people. You know, it's not easy when you're virtual, but it has really worked well. It's been a really rich presentation by all of you. It has given, I think, a total picture from early childhood through to third level of what's happening in relation to creative youth programs, but bigger and broader than that. I think you have raised some important questions for the future and for policymakers. And I am assured that these will be taken on board by creative youth, that all of the comments of all of the contributors will be taken on board as well. The material will be harvested and it will be fed into the national conference. And my very last word is just to thank you, audience, for staying with us. Again, I hope that you have found it engaging And you can tune in again on Thursday at 12:30 to listen to us with a different panel talk about creative youth in the community. I think I have about 8 seconds to go. So with that, I'll just wish you all well and stay safe and keep creativity flowing and flourishing. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Take care.